Welcome to GenealCymru. My name is Di, and today we're going to talk about homelessness in Victorian Britain, and what you need to know to be able to find and understand your homeless ancestors. To do this, we're going to focus on the life of William Croom, who I first encountered while looking through the Cardiganshire Constabulary Register of Criminals. William was born in Cardiff in 1869 and grew up to work as a chimney sweep, but for much of his life he was homeless and struggled with alcoholism. Where we can learn the most about William Croom and others like him is in the historic newspapers. The Victorians were a bit obsessed with crime, and especially violent crime, and the newspapers really fueled this obsession. So if you look at a newspaper like The Times, one of the papers analyzed by Dr. Christopher Casey, in 1801 it printed 67 stories of lethal violence, while by the 1850s it printed almost 600 a year on average, and by the 1880s that average was over 1,000 stories per year. According to Dr. Casey's research, the amount of violent crime actually decreased across the century. So in the pursuit of higher sales, the media created this illusion of increased crime where there never was one. But this obsession with crime stories preserved part of the story of people like William Croom. The earliest record I found of William was printed in 1886, when he was just 18 years old. He had been in a blowout fight with his father and sister. He left the house, taking his father's boots, and then sold them for some money and another pair of boots. This is the only record I found showing him having a residence, 1 East Street, Cardiff. In all of the other records, William was referred to as having no fixed abode, or as a tramp, a beggar, or a vagrant. In 1900, he stole a pony, which he sold to a butcher for £0.50, which at that time was equivalent to about 1.5 days' wages for a skilled tradesman. And in 1904, he was sentenced to 2 weeks' hard labor for begging alms. While these were the earliest news stories I found about his life, they weren't his first encounters with the carceral system. In the 1897 Calendar of Prisoners, we see William in a comprehensive list of his crimes and punishments. In 1891, he stole a coat, 1896, a pair of boots, 1897, a chimney sweeping machine, and during that time he was arrested 4 times for assault, vagrancy, which means homelessness, and drunkenness. In each case, he was sentenced to hard labor until he was imprisoned around 1901. His imprisonment in 1901 is the only time I was able to find him in the census. Generally, the England and Wales census is the staple in our genealogy research, and it's packed with information. And because it was taken every 10 years, it's like a recurring snapshot of our ancestors' lives. And it was taken by an enumerator who went about collecting information about our ancestors, house by house. But that's the thing, they went house by house. And if any of our ancestors were homeless at the time of the census, you won't find them recorded until maybe 1911. 1911 was the first time there was a systematic effort made to record information about the lives of homeless people in the census. So the 1911 census was taken differently in their cases. Rather than your usual enumerator taking information, it was the police who were sent out by the then Home Secretary Winston Churchill. This resulted in the 1911 police return of homeless persons. It was the police who were used to create this register because homelessness at that time was already a policing issue ever since the Vagrancy Act of 1824. If we were looking at the earlier part of the 1800s, homelessness was generally managed at the parish level, so the parish relief council might arrange housing for people, especially if there were children or disabled, and the parish constable would be the one to harass and move along people who were sleeping outside at night. But since the time of the Vagrancy Act, homelessness became a policing issue, and it was criminalized and punishable by a month of hard labor. This obviously was never intended to help homeless people find housing or employment or whatever other kind of support they needed, and that's something that we see throughout William Crum's life. October 5th, 1905. A sweep's pathetic appeal. William stole a shirt off a clothesline. He went to the police to turn himself in and begged to be sent to an inebriate's home. Inebriates' homes were one of the Victorians' attempts to manage public drunkenness. They were like asylums where alcoholics were sent, and they ran on a blend of reform, rehabilitation, and punishment. William looked to the home as a source of hope, and the article says that he declared he came from a good family, but drink and bad company had been his downfall. He said to the magistrate, "It's no use sending me to prison for a couple of weeks, because I shall only do something serious when I come out. Send me away for a few years in order that I may start a new life." The magistrate ignored his plea and sentenced him to just 14 days of prison. And that wouldn't be the last time William tried to access the welfare system of the time and met with obstacles. February 23, 1906, Inhuman Treatment. William and his friend went to the police station and asked for a ticket to enter the workhouse. The workhouses were places where poor people could go or where they were sent to get housing and some minor employment. With their tickets, William and his friend proceeded to the workhouse, and they were turned away. At that point, they were soaking wet from the rain and on the verge of starvation, and they ended up having to sleep in a shed overnight. In the morning, left with no other options, they begged on the street for money, and they were arrested by the same police who they asked for help the night before. At court, the mayor said that it was wrong of the workhouse officials to deny them entry, and then he proceeded to sentence William and his friend to 7 days imprisonment, saying that his sentence was a, quote, real kindness. They could at least get their clothes dry. I don't want to risk idealizing either the workhouse or the inebriate's home. They weren't these cushy, warm, supportive environments there to help people in need. They were viewed by experts at the time in different ways, but you wouldn't be remiss to note their similarities to prisons in how they centered punishment and social exclusion. Even some Victorian critics referred to the workhouses as prisons for the poor. And it wasn't just metaphorical. Especially the early workhouse layouts were actually designed based on the prison panopticon. And as for the inebriates' homes, they were often effectively a eugenics project, meant to manage the future of the race. So they disproportionately targeted women and mothers, locking them up to prevent them from having more children, since the Victorians wrongly believed they would biologically pass alcoholism down to their children. Now, what I really want to highlight is that people like William aren't just collections of crimes or the bad things they've done. When you look at the records like these, you really need to pay attention to the perspective that they're written from. You could ask, what did William do? Or you could ask more important questions. What were his goals? What were his beliefs? What were his moments of feeling cared for or supported? Those might be a bit harder to answer. Or you could also ask, was society equipped to help him? The punishments given him certainly didn't change his situation, and his later encounters with the police and the state show just how abandoned the poor and homeless were. And I'm also not gonna lie to you and say that things were bad back then, but everything's all right now. Look how far we've come. The kind of social support that poor and homeless people want and deserve still doesn't exist in most places, and where it might, it's seriously underfunded. Things are still not great. So if you have any free time or funds, I definitely encourage you to look into grassroots organizations in your area that work with communities on issues of homelessness and addiction. Make sure that they're organizations that look to the communities for leadership, because they are the ones who know best the kinds of struggles they face and what kinds of solutions can address them. William Crum certainly did. Thanks for watching, and if you've learned anything from this video, you can let me know by hitting the like button. And if you want to learn more about Victorian Britain, you can check out this next video.